Hi, I'm Lynn Clarence, and I manage a team of fabulous fundraisers here at Second Harvest of Silicon Valley. And I am so lucky to work with our amazing two speakers today. I'd like to welcome our guests and to thank each of you for your support and for providing hope to our community. And speaking of hope, I hope you've all filled out the poll that you should be able to see now as we get started. I also really want to engage you in conversation today and encourage you to post your questions using the Q&A in the Zoom window below. And the chat is turned off, so but feel free to use the Q&A. So today we're talking about the future of food banking and why we expect the unprecedented need for food assistance to continue here in Silicon Valley. So first, let me introduce our speakers, Leslie Bacho and Tracy Weatherby. Leslie, our CEO, joined us here at Second Harvest in 2017 after serving as the COO of the SF Marin Food Bank for 19 years. Prior to Leslie's food banking career, she served as a brand manager at the Clorox Company. Leslie's also had a variety of leadership roles with the national anti-hunger organization Feeding America and serves on the board of the California Association of Food Banks. Leslie earned her MBA from Duke and her MBA from Northwestern. And she's one busy person. I don't know how she does it all. Tracy joined Second Harvest a year later in 2018 as the VP of Strategy and Advocacy. Tracy's team works with schools and other community organizations to leverage government programs to ensure all students have access to healthy meals. She also leads legislation and advocacy efforts by collaborating with government agencies and officials to advocate for policies in support of reducing hunger. Tracy earned her MBA from Stanford with a concentration in public management. And I'll see you at the big game, Tracy. Maybe, I hope so. Now, before we hear from Tracy and Leslie, we'd love to share the results of the poll. I see. Linda, are we ready to, done with the poll? Okay, great. Oh, wonderful. Here we go. I've got the results in front of me. This is so fun. Okay, I'm very impressed here. So in a recent survey of Second Harvest clients, what percentage indicated they have less than $100 of savings? And I see most of us got the answer correct, that it is 60% of our clients have less than $100 in savings. Question number 2. In addition to ensuring free food for all, how else is Second Harvest addressing food insecurity? And I see the answers, and it's multiple choice. So this is beautiful. 90% of you say that, that we are signing up people for CalFresh, also known as SNAP or food stamps, and that is correct. 57% of you say that you believe we work with healthcare partnerships, and in fact, yes, we do. And then 67% of you know we have nutrition education programs, which is also the case. And not sure, tell me more, we'll get back to you. So thank you for that. And then before the pandemic, Second Harvest was serving 250,000 clients per month. How many are we serving now? And this is not a trick question. It is 450,000 people per month. And I see 86% of you got that right. So thank you so much for participating in the poll. So Leslie, let's start with you. Based on your 20+ years of food banking experience, which includes the Great Recession of 2008, can you tell us what you see as the future of food banking in Silicon Valley?
Thank you, Lynn. Yeah, that's a great question. Unfortunately, we know that many of the families and individuals we serve have faced just incredible financial hardship during the pandemic, really the kind of hardship that it takes months or often years to overcome. We believe that this unprecedented need for food assistance will continue well into the future, and that's really based on a few factors. Number one, many people don't realize that we were already facing a food insecurity crisis here in the Valley before the pandemic. And that's really due to the high cost of living. People were already working in low wage jobs and really struggling to pay their rent, cover their basic living expenses, and still put food on the table. Once shelter in place went into effect and food insecurity skyrocketed, so did the awareness of our services. So we're likely reaching a lot of people that we should have been reaching pre-pandemic. And one thing we know is there is really so much stigma associated with asking for help. And during the pandemic, when people saw these visuals of just the long lines of cars pulling up for food, it helped people not only realize that food insecurity existed right here in a place of such wealth and affluence, but it also helped people who needed our services not feel so alone. And it also, frankly, just let them know our services were out there. The second thing is that we're now serving so many people who never needed our services before, and people who pre-pandemic were maybe living paycheck to paycheck, but felt like they were making it, and then suddenly found themselves out of work and without any income. And, I recall meeting a woman just a couple of months into the pandemic who described to me just how vividly she recalled when she got that phone call, and this was right when shelter in place went into effect, just letting her know that the coffee shop where she worked was closing and telling her that, she was going to be out of a job for the foreseeable future. And, they were able to make it okay. Her husband was still working, but a few weeks later, he lost his job as a custodian at a local office building. And it actually still took them about a month to get to us. And she described just how desperate they were feeling and just what a lifesaver having that food assistance was. And that really reflects so many stories of our clients who are working in these, low wage jobs, mostly in the service industry, who were really financially devastated by the pandemic. So even though it might start to feel like things are getting back to normal, for so many of our neighbors, even if they're gone back to work, they have now, completely wiped out their savings. They're behind on rent and other expenses. And we know that this is likely to continue for a long time. I hear heartbreaking stories from people who maybe they were even starting to save up for things like, families who are living, multiple families in a small apartment, and they've been saving up to be able to move to a larger place. Or maybe they were saving up for their kids to be able to go to college. And now they've had to completely blow those savings. And then also they're behind on other expenses. So when you think about just the long-term consequences of that, that's what we're facing. Lynn already shared a recent survey of our clients that showed 50% of clients said that they were unsure how they would make their next housing payment. And then 60% of people said they had less than $100 in savings. If you could just imagine the vulnerability of having so little cushion. So we know it's going to take families a long time to recover from this kind of financial deficit. I was doing this work back in 2008 during the Great Recession, and we saw that it really took years for low-income families to recover. And we never really, kind of permanently increased the number of people we were serving. For Second Harvest, at the height of this pandemic, we were serving more than 500,000 people a month. Now that has gone down slightly. We're consistently serving more like, 80% more people than we were serving pre-pandemic. But we don't think that that is going to go down, unfortunately, anytime soon. But you asked what the future looks like, and I just also wanted to highlight that we've had a lot of learnings from this pandemic that are really going to change how we do this work going forward. One thing we saw is this pandemic really exacerbated the extreme income inequality we have here in Silicon Valley. And we saw how disproportionately impacted communities of color were in this pandemic. Already pre-pandemic, we were transitioning to a more regional model of doing this work that has us going deeper community by community to better understand local needs, to understand who we're missing, and to really identify who can be the trusted organizations or people in the community that we can partner with to better reach them. This involves also better utilizing data to identify areas of need, and then also being in conversation with people experiencing food insecurity. During the pandemic, we started doing things like using Salesforce to help us run our distributions more efficiently. And that was a great way, using tablets to collect client data and also to collect cell phone numbers. So now we're able to more easily let clients know if a distribution changes, but we can also check in to find out how we're doing and to also better understand what's going on for our clients. We've also always had a very strong focus on nutrition and nutrition education. Of course, in the pandemic, we had to really pivot and improve how we're doing this work virtually, but that also gave us an opportunity to look at things like how we could provide more culturally relevant recipes so that our healthy eating recipes were tailored to the cultures we're serving. We also saw in this pandemic just how many seniors were really isolated and didn't have anybody to pick up a box of food for them. And so we started doing home delivery. We're now delivering to more than 4,000 households a month. And that's something we hope to grow in the future, because we know that there are many people who are homebound but still have enough mobility to prepare meals in their home. This pandemic also changed how we provide this food out in the community. Before the pandemic, we had a real focus on client choice and these beautiful farmers markets where people could walk up and select what they wanted. Of course, during the pandemic, to keep people safe, we started pre-boxing food and standing up these drive-throughs and safely putting it in the trunks of people's cars. And one thing we've learned is that for a lot of people, they prefer this method of distribution because of the convenience, because of the anonymity provided by staying in your car, and it's a lot more efficient. And even though we hope to go back to a client choice model for many of our sites, going forward, we'll likely still have a lot of drive-through options for folks that prefer that. So those are just some of the changes that will impact the future of food banking. And I just want to also emphasize that all of this work and all of these changes are only possible because of the incredible network of people and organizations that are Second Harvest. And that includes our incredible staff. I have to give a shout out to our staff who have really just pulled out all the stops during this pandemic to continue to serve our community. It also takes our over 300 nonprofit partners who are also deep in this work with us. And then just the tens of thousands of volunteers and donors that provide the support that it takes to serve 450,000 people every month. And that certainly includes everyone on this call. So I just want to say just my tremendous gratitude for everybody who has really stepped up and helped us with their support during this pandemic.
Well, thank you, Leslie. You covered a lot there. It was fascinating. Interesting to hear about the seniors, how illuminating that was for us. Well, thank you very much, Leslie. Let me turn to you now, Tracy. Can you tell us what your team's doing to leverage policy and advocacy to meet the needs of our clients?
Yeah, a lot of people think of Second Harvest as distributing fresh, nutritious food, but the fact is that we're always trying to look at the whole picture about how our community can be served and how we can reduce food insecurity. So I have a very small team that works on legislation at the local, state, and federal level. So we're always looking at ways to improve programs that help our communities. The food bank is a really major player in signing people up for CalFresh, which is known as SNAP nationally, which used to be known as food stamps. So it's a very confusing program, but essentially it's a debit card that allows people to buy groceries at the grocery store. You need to be very low income to qualify for it, and it doesn't provide a huge amount of money in a lot of cases, but it's a really important support for our community. So we have a team of, I think it's about 16 people in our Food Connection staff now who speak many different languages, and they get people signed up for CalFresh. They refer them to our food distributions and to other community resources that will help them out. So that's a really big effort for us. And then we also work a lot with kids and schools. School meals are a federally provided program. And we've been big advocates for trying to provide school meals for all. Our view is that as you look at schools, we don't divide up our kids and say, you need to bring your own baseball because you can afford it. You should pay for your textbook because you can afford it. What we want to make sure is that kids have everything they need to thrive when they get to school, and food is one of those primary things. Right now, we kind of divide kids up into free meals, reduced meals, and paid meals. And that doesn't create community, it creates stigma. It doesn't allow kids to eat together. A lot of kids avoid getting the free meals they really need because they don't want to be singled out as that kid. So we're really thrilled because a couple things happened. We were advocating for this before the pandemic. We co-sponsored a bill at the state level to do this, and that did not pass, but it happened right before the pandemic. And during the pandemic, the federal government agreed that we should be feeding all the kids. So there have been waivers in place last year and again this year that's going to feed all the kids at school, breakfast and lunch if they need it. And seeing that in action, and then with some of the push from our bill, a lot of our partners got together, and California passed school meals for all. So all kids in California ongoing, even after this next year, will get breakfast and lunch at school. And when you think about the impact that can have on food insecurity, it's just huge.
Oh, congratulations again on that. Oh, that is such a huge win. I'm just so pleased that the state has gone in that direction. Thank you, Tracy. Leslie, I have a question for you. Since the beginning of the pandemic, and we've heard and we continue to hear a lot about the supply chain issues. And can you tell us if food banking is affected by these challenges?
Well, sure. I mean, supply chain issues have been a challenge throughout the pandemic, and really, flexibility and adaptability have kind of been the name of the game since the beginning. And I really give a lot of kudos to our team, who has been really thoughtful in how we are sourcing food. And for example, we have been leasing a fourth warehouse during this pandemic, not only because we needed the space to handle this volume of food, but also, we try to grab items when they become available and store them if we need to, and then kind of swap out items as other items become scarce. And it has really taken a lot of creativity throughout to make sure that we can have the kind of robust offering we want to for our clients. We also have seen, certainly a big rise in prices, which has been a challenge. This is just this morning, I was on a phone call where staff were talking about the issue we're having with corrugated right now. We use a lot of cardboard because we are, packing all these boxes of food. And so not only has the price gone up dramatically, a lot of folks haven't been able to kind of come through on shipments. And so we're looking at other suppliers. We're doing things like experimenting with packing, these 25 pound mesh bags of produce so that when the corrugated doesn't show up, we have an alternative. So it's taken a lot of creativity. But, I also want to just take a moment to talk about the scale of what we're doing now, because it's kind of hard to get your head around. We're now providing twice as much food as we were before the pandemic. And so kind of what does that look like? And right now, every single week, we are receiving over 90 tractor trailer loads, so 90 big rigs of food into our facility. Again, half of that is fresh produce that we are getting by the truckload, mostly from the Central Valley, and we're getting that produce donated, and then we pay a handling fee and we pay the transportation to get it to us. That's getting married up with milk and eggs and frozen chicken and kind of other staple items, and getting boxed. And then those are all going out on trucks that are making, over 400 deliveries to our community throughout the week. And this only happens because of our, over 300 nonprofit partners and just the incredible network that happens to ensure that food gets to the people who need it. And most people think that we get a lot of funding from our government, but actually only a very small percentage of our budget, usually less than 10%, it got a little bit higher to 12% during the pandemic, comes from government sources. Over 65% of the funding we raise comes from individuals.
Great, Leslie, thank you so much. It's very complex, much more than one thing, running a food bank. There's no doubt about that. A question for you, Tracy. We had a huge win with the California legislation supporting school meals for all. What's coming next from your team?
Well, we're working very closely with a lot of our local school districts to help them with implementing that, because it's a big lift for a lot of school districts to have to suddenly feed all of the kids. So we convene an organization called the Child Nutrition Coalition that is food service directors from all the different districts sharing best practices. We help with infrastructure. We help with promoting those meals so that they can get the appropriate reimbursement and get the right level of participation from kids. And we're advocating for school meals for all in the federal Build Back Better bill as well, because we think kids outside California should also get school meals. And one other thing I wanted to just touch on is we also work with our local governments on food rescue. 3/4 of the food that we provide is donated in one way or another. For instance, our 50% of fresh produce is primarily sourced from donations from California farmers, overage food. It's beautiful produce, but we're able to buy it on pennies of the pound, just the transportation, not actually purchasing the product. But we also rescue food from grocery stores, wholesalers. That was about 17 million pounds of what we received last year, and that provides some great variety for our clients. And there's a new state law, SB 1383, which goes into effect in January, that will require more of these food generators to donate. So we are working with our counties to build up our capacity and to enable our partners to be able to rescue a lot of that food. So that will both, once again, provide great variety for our clients and be a really big impact on reducing greenhouse gases and helping with the environment. So that's another area where we're spending some time.
Tracy's another very busy person, as we can see, as we hear. Thank you, Tracy. And thank you both, Leslie and Tracy, for sharing your perspectives on your work and what you see as the future of food banking. And I would just want to encourage anyone to ask if you have any questions that haven't been answered, to please go ahead and put them in the Q&A. As you're doing that, I'm going to take a sip of water from my favorite mug of the year. I think they're sold out at Target now, but I had to give a plug for my mug. Okay, let me, I see a couple of questions here. Let me go ahead and ask this one. And Leslie, this is from Leslie, another Leslie. This is a good question. During the pandemic, demand understandably surged. Desperate situations forced people to find you and to overcome the stigma. But having discovered a source of free food, why would low-income people ever stop using it, even after employment resumes and their income rises? Won't they then tell their friends, driving demand up further? Is there some way to base your service on need? And Tracy, I'll ask you to answer that one. Thank you.
Oh, I thought Leslie was answering that one.
Oh yeah,
Yeah, no,
Leslie,
I'm happy.
sorry. Yeah, pardon me.
I'm
Leslie,
happy to answer that. And I understand your question. And I have to say, having been doing this work for more than 20 years, in my experience, it is very hard for people to ask for help. We just culturally, we have a culture that really prides independence and self-reliance. And I have been in conversation with people where when they describe the struggle they're going through, the meals they might be skipping, and then you say, why aren't you coming to your local food distribution? They say, well, that is for people who are really, really desperate. But I hear your question on, once you get people there, why wouldn't they just continue to take advantage of your services? And I have to say, it's also been my experience that people not only approach our service with great gratitude, but also they do want to cycle out of needing our services. And so we see a lot of folks who are former clients who become volunteers, or I get lots of donor notes from folks who have been recipients who are now on the other side of needing our help and want to donate whatever they can to try to support our services because they recognize how critical the need is. And I really, even though I would like to think that we are providing such an easy, wonderful way to receive food, I've got to tell you, people are still waiting in lines of cars, to receive our food. They're still having to come, not any time of the day, any day of the week, but in a particular window to be able to receive that food. I would love to think we were making it so easy that this is going to be very attractive to you, even if you have the resources to procure food on your own. But I'm afraid that's not the case. So I just have to say, in my experience, for people to show up for a free food distribution, it is usually because they can really use the help and they are eager to get on the other side of it. And like I say, then give back by volunteering or donating, because people don't like to feel like they are living off the resources of others. People want to have, we all want to have our independence.
Oh, good. Thank you. And thank you, Leslie, for answering and asking that question. I have another question for you, Leslie, and thinking about the future of Second Harvest work here in Silicon Valley, what issues or challenges keep you up at night?
Well, certainly raising the support to continue to do this work is a real challenge. And I just think about, during this pandemic, we saw that if food banks and our network of partners weren't here, there was nobody else really equipped to do this work. And one thing we've been doing is, we not only recognize the strain this is on our resources, but the strain this has created on our partners. So during this pandemic, we increased the infrastructure grants we provide to our partners. We have really tried to be, in conversation with them to understand what do they need to be able to continue to do this work with us. We also, as I mentioned before, we don't get a lot of government assistance. And so we are just really, what's really on my mind is how we continue to raise the support from our community, how we continue to communicate just how serious the need is, even when things start to feel better for so many of us.
Great. Thank you so much, Leslie. I see the time is flying by here, and I am going to just thank the other David and Steve for your wonderful questions, and we will get back to you on those answers, because what I would like to do is just to wrap up it here and just extend a huge thanks to all of our participants here today. We hope you feel informed and inspired about your transformative work you support. With just a couple minutes left, we want to remind you to feel free to connect with your Second Harvest representative if you have any questions or comments. And I want to just thank each of you for the difference that you're making in the lives of our neighbors. And as we close today's donor briefing, I'd like to share with you how you've helped our neighbors Anna and Oscar as we together watched this short 3-minute video. I assure you these 3 minutes are well spent. And after the video, please stay on to complete the survey. I just want to thank you all, including our amazing speakers, and wish you all happy holidays.
Thanks.
And with that, we'll start the video. Thank you.
Tengo a mi esposa, su nombre es Ana. Tengo a 3 hermosos niños. La mayor se llama Kimberly, la segunda se llama Montserrat y tengo a Oscar Jr. Yo trabajo casi 10 horas o 11 horas en veces cuando hay mucho trabajo y se siente tan bonito que tus hijos no se quieran dormir sin antes decirte buenas noches.
¿Qué cambió cuando vino la pandemia en mi vida? Todo. Cuando mi esposo perdió el trabajo, él llegó a casa, él dijo no hay más trabajo y no sé hasta cuándo vaya a haber trabajo. Fueron 8 meses que dejó de trabajar.
Nunca lo he expresado con mi esposa ni mis hijos, pero interiormente sí se siente feo el no tener trabajo, el saber que no tienes un ingreso y que los biles están lloviendo. Yo lo absorbía solo porque pues yo soy la cabeza de la familia, entonces yo no podía estar llorando enfrente de ellos, porque si yo lloraba, ellos iban a llorar.
Y necesitábamos pagar nuestros biles, nuestras cosas, y sin trabajo, sin poder salir, sin poder proveer, sin poder hacer nada.
De nuestros ahorros para la universidad de mi hija
y todo poco a poco se fue yendo. Y tú sin poder hacer nada.
Lo que me costó en años, solo en meses lo pudimos gastar.
Hasta que llegamos a una organización llamada Second Harvest, donde ellos proveen comida para la comunidad. Entonces nosotros cada vez que abrimos cajas, es algo bien bonito. Es algo que no puedes describir.
Podemos juntarnos todos como familia, sentarnos en una mesa y disfrutar de la comida que nos dan. Entonces mi esposo y yo tratamos de ahorrar ese dinero para el futuro de nuestros hijos. Aquí a lo mejor ahorita nosotros tenemos un apartamento pequeño, cambiamos a un lugar más grande y ellos puedan inspirarse a tener una casa. No sabemos, no tenemos la fecha, el año exacto, pero quizás a lo mejor son 8 años o quizás pueden ser 9 o quizás pueden ser 10. Y entonces sí vamos a poder depender de Second Harvest.
Es una familia y esa familia nos envuelven a nosotros también. Nosotros somos familia de Second Harvest. Cada niño que abre la leche y le ponen un cereal o abre una leche y lo ponen en un vasito y se lo toman, sonríen con una esperanza en sus manos. ¿Y qué es? Una caja, una bolsa. Esa es la esperanza que mucha gente se lleva a sus casas. Second Harvest ha llegado a todas las casas.